Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next perfect step, where all possibilities lie in conversation. I'm your co host, Lori Mullen.
I'm your co-host, Lori Tremblay, and we are so happy to have you join us today. Recently, we've had some guests on our show about talking about grief, Henry Cameron Allen and Helen Fernald. And Helen introduced us to Aria Amos, sorry, and she is our special guest today, and she has experienced her own experience of grief and has written a book, The Tears That Water My Growth, which is amazing. So welcome, Aria. We're so pleased that you're with us today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'd like to get to know you a little bit better. If you just want to tell us how you got to write your book and what your story is.
Yeah, definitely. So my parents and my family, my two siblings, we all moved over here with my parents' mobile dog grooming unit, way back in like 2011, and we were back and forth to Australia for a few years until we decided to travel the country with the mobile dog grooming unit and raise money at shelters and events. So we traveled to 48 states and washed dogs at shelters to give back. And then at the events, all the money we raised would go back to that local shelter we were supporting that day. So we did that for about almost 4 years. And then we ended up having a TV show on Animal Planet for just like 6 episodes. It was just kind of a 3 month thing. And then we were planning to do a second season. So we settled down up in the New England area. So we would be closer to the film crew, which was in Philadelphia. So that way, us kids could actually finish school instead of doing homeschooling. And then we could kind of just be in a house again because the RV was getting quite small with just, the five of us. And we are like all becoming teenagers. So it was starting to get a little, hostile at times. But we were just always super close knit. So when we moved here, my dad was diagnosed with cancer about just a couple months after we moved here. And after almost a year, he was in remission. So he was actually at a stage 4 colon cancer. And he was able to get to the point where he was in remission and he was just having, the final things that make him healthier and stuff. And then about a month after that, my mum passed away due to like malpractice. So it was just a simple surgery. And then it got, it went wrong basically. And she passed away. And then a week after she passed away, my dad passed away. Sorry, my dad was re-diagnosed with cancer. And then less than a year later, he passed away as well. So we had lost both our parents within a year of each other. And then a week after my dad passed away, we got evicted from our house. So in that time frame, we lost both our parents. So we were orphaned and then we were homeless. So we definitely kind of all looked at each other and were like, what do? We don't have any family over here. All of our family lives in Australia. So we thought, what do we do? And we were kind of living between friends at the time until we could find like a 6 month rental. And then we were just in and out of places for a few years. And now we're kind of in a more stable rental, I guess you could say, until we wait for our green cards because immigration was a whole nother thing because we aren't US citizens. So it's been definitely a huge learning curve throughout all of these experiences because it wasn't just, grief. It was trying to figure out where to live. And there were so many other factors that played onto it that definitely made me realize a lot of things, I guess, about myself specifically that I started writing poetry, which helped me express how I was feeling. So ever since my mum passed away, I started writing. And it was definitely very therapeutic for me. And I never thought that it would be something that I would share with others. Like I would read it to my siblings and my friends and stuff, but I never thought I would publish a book until I did, So I had hundreds of poems that I just wrote and, whether I thought they were good or bad, I just knew it was helping me just put it down on paper and express it. So then I decided to publish a book. And yeah, it's definitely, even though it may not be, off the charts, New York bestseller, but it's definitely helping a lot of people that I didn't realize it would have such an impact on, whether it's, one person or 10 or however many. The fact that it reached one person is what, means the most to me. So it's been a journey, but it's definitely paying off, I guess, to see the helping others. Yeah.
Wow. I can't imagine. I can't imagine the shock and everything that you went through in such a quick time, and then having to process that. And I just and then reading your poems. Did you have some that you'd like to share with us? Because I just love your book.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would love to. I can read the pandemic one, because
Yeah.
we lost our mum and our dad throughout the pandemic. This is kind of like my take on, part of it. So it's called Pandemic. Everyone wearing masks made me get to know your eyes really well. The light blue magic with hints of yellow, moon shapes when you smiled, telling a million stories, asking a million questions, with not a single answer. I knew when you weren't okay, the way puddles formed and tears rolled. Like a beautiful, sad melody, your eyes were your worst enemy, giving away all your secrets.
Mm, that's so beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it definitely, as I said before, when I read that poem, it brought a whole new light. I never, I mean, there was such controversy about wearing masks and everything that I never really realized that we finally got the gift to actually see into each other's eyes, to actually look at people's eyes. I mean, there's a saying that your eyes are the windows to your soul. And so we got to see people and see their eyes. And I think that's just, I mean, I have just been thinking about that ever since I read your poem. What a beautiful gift that actually was. I mean, a lot of times we don't look into each other's eyes when we're talking or anything like that. And that really, when we put masks on, it really did force us to look at each other's eyes. And you're right, your eyes say so much. So thank you for that. It was actually a beautiful perspective that I haven't stopped thinking about since I read your poem. Um, and you talked about, even reaching one person. I mean, it seems like your life has been about service. I mean, your whole family gave to rescuing dogs and animals, and now you're gifting the world with this beautiful book. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for all your service. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really two amazingly great services you've done.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't be able to go through what I've been through without having the parents that we had, because they taught us so many lessons, like the value of giving back at such a young age. And then there's so many things that I still, make sense now when I'm, adulting, I guess, at like 15. I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. But I learned that from them, and they like planted these seeds in my mind that I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And it's helped me, they were just such strong people to kind of have that to look up to, that we all have that now, where we're like, we can do this, There's days that you maybe feel like you can't because, you just wish they were here. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you actually did it. And you can look back and be like, I got through that. And that makes you so much stronger to keep going. There's just so many perspectives of grief that I feel like aren't talked about enough. It's just like, the 5 stages, but I don't really believe that there are exactly 5 stages of grief. There is, yeah, the 5 stages are there, but they're all over the place, and it's like a roller coaster of just emotions that you learn to understand more when you kind of sit there and hold your grief's hand, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna understand you at like a different level, so you kind of don't um I don't know, I guess take over me sometimes, as grief tends to do. So if you try to learn it and understand your emotions better, it can definitely help kind of understand how to cope with certain things.
I totally agree. And this is something we talked about with Helen too, is you are so right. There are so many aspects of grief we just don't talk about. Grief is sad and we don't want to make people sad, right? So we kind of skip over it. We say we're sorry. We really don't know what to say. We don't know how to talk about it. And it's really something that we need to learn. And we need to learn to talk about grief in order to like you said, work with it, hold its hand, move. I want to say move through it. I mean, I too have lost my mother, and it's been 24 years. And like you, there are still days that, you know, I wish she was here. I would love to, you know, give her a hug and talk to her. So even 24 years later, but you know, we say something like we learn to live with it, and really we need to learn to talk about it. And so, you know, I totally agree with you and with Helen that, you know, we need to find a way to make this an okay conversation and to be able to talk about it or through with people and in a supportive way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And I just feel like there's so many people who don't know how to deal with grief when they see someone else going through it. Like I had so many friends just leave, and so many people in my life just, they're like, "Oh, I thought you needed space." I'm like, "That's the last thing I needed, you know, like I just lost so much and now I'm losing you guys as well." But I don't blame them. I just think it, especially at the age we were at as well, it's like, what are you supposed to do? Like, there's no, you know, guide to say how to handle someone who's going through grief, especially at such like a young age. And I think that should be taught more, is just to be there, you know, and just kind of offer your support and say, like, I'm just going to show up today, instead of just saying, I don't know what to do. Because I didn't know what to do at the time either. So it definitely is hard to kind of understand grief from the outside perspective as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we're a fix-it world, right? So if we can't fix it and we don't know what to do, we run away, right? We just back ourselves out. And really, I mean, one of the other lessons I think we really need to learn is to sit in silence with somebody, right? I mean, if somebody just sat beside you and was there with you, even though they couldn't fix it for you or didn't have all the answers for you, like you said, just to know that they were there with you and to just maybe sit in silence.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that isolation was really hard to
Yeah.
kind of get through. And I think I'd never really had really bad anxiety, but after they passed away, I didn't go a day without having a panic attack after my mum passed away. And thank God I had my dad, because it's like that's such a strong emotion that came up through losing someone that I had no idea how to handle. I was kind of just sitting there like, what do I do? Like I asked my dad, and he had gone through it before, so he's like, let me, you know, tell you kind of how to deal with it and whatever. But it's like that strong, intense emotion. I thought I was dying. Like panic attacks are just so difficult to deal with and handle. But once you get through it on the other end, and like, I guess I'm going back to understanding your own grief, is like when someone was there, like my dad, even though it's something I have to handle like internally, just having someone kind of walk me through it was so helpful. And just having someone sit there and be like, okay, I'm not alone through this, was just, it helped me beyond measures, you know. So I think it's important to share the fact that, like, just show up for people, even if it's not grief, even if they're just going through something really hard, just show up. And I just think that's so important.
Yeah. Well, one thing that struck me in reading your poems is how deeply you feel and understand things and express them. It was just really beautiful the way you write. You write like right to the point, but you go deep. And
Mhm.
so I was just thinking, gosh, you're much wiser than I was at your age. But it was just beautiful. And you were saying something about your parents, the poem mantra.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you want to do you
yeah,
want to read that?
yes,
It's on page 94.
yeah. So a little backstory on this poem is my dad, every time we'd go to school, he would do a mantra that we'd say all these words back to him, and it was like 5 minutes long. So every day before school, we'd have this, like, you know, things we wouldn't even understand at the time, that now I look back on, I'm like, it's just so interesting. So this is kind of like the backstory of that. So it's called mantra. Integrity, courage, honor, the three words repeated in childhood, three words that aren't said enough, respected enough. Where did decency go, morals go? why do those three words mean? What do those three words mean? Because it seems like no one knows, which tied into the fact that we were brought up a certain way and sometimes others weren't. And it's kind of like looking at the two, it's not wrong. It's not wrong that they don't know that because it's how you were raised solely and what you kind of pick up. So it's kind of weird to look at what I would have done. You know what I mean? What I would have done if I had a friend that went through something like this
Mm-hmm.
compared to what some of my friends did. Like, no doubt a lot of them, like some stayed around, but it's like the ones that left, I would have never done that to you. So it's honestly different perspectives, and I don't hold any like hatred or anything towards it. It's something that I learned to be like, okay, look, this is simply a different perspective about grief. They see it differently than I do. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes us different. And, it's meant to be if they can't show up the way I want them to. So it's just those little things that I learned and picked up and saw through a different lens that helped me understand not only my grief better, but how other people react to grief. And that's why I want to write so much more about grief, is because I'm like, I can notice all of these experiences because I've been through it, so I just think it's all very interesting. And I just want other people to, I always wanted a beacon of someone who's gone through something really hard to be like, okay, I can do that when I first lost my parents. So I kind of want to be that for other people who are like, okay, I just lost this person. Like, what do I do? Who can I go to? I want to be that person that can just be like, okay, her writing, I can understand her writing, or whatever she's talking about in grief, like that's something I can look at and understand as well, So that's kind of my goal with whatever I end up doing.
Beautiful.
And
I
it
was gonna have,
absolutely is. I mean, not just that you're teaching people how to deal with grief, but maybe somebody who's going through grief who feels alone, like you did, in reading your book, doesn't feel so alone.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like that's all I ask for, is that I can help, just one person do it.
No, I think you're doing amazing work. I mean, it's definitely a subject that seems so taboo, and like I said, nobody really wants to talk about it because it comes with the feeling of sadness and grief, and yet we need to learn. We need
Yeah.
to learn to have that conversation and to be able to teach the next generation how to show up for somebody who's going through that, so that we don't feel so uncomfortable and afraid to be around somebody going through something difficult.
I have a question for you, Aria. I lost my mom about a year ago, but I had her for a long time, and I'm grateful for that. But my dad died like a year before she did. So I know everyone has different belief systems, but I feel like they're not that far away. I feel like they're near, in my opinion. And so I did this experiment a couple of times where I just tried to connect with them, and talk with them internally. And I feel like I made a connection. It felt like their energy was there. And they've been in my dreams. So I was wondering if anything like that happened with you and your siblings, or how's that been an experience for you?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like ever since my mum was in hospital, me and my dad, once we woke up at 3:33 a.m. at the same time, and we were like with this immense like we both described it the next morning, and it was like this warmth of just like it's going to be okay, because we were both super on edge and anxious, of course. So we were like, oh my gosh, like that was mum. And ever since then, like once you can just open your heart up to it, they're right there. Like
Yeah.
honestly, especially, someone you loved so much and cared about so much that like they live inside you. There's a piece of them there, and they are always looking out for you. And I believe, seriously, if I sit there and I'm like, I talk to my parents all the time, like when I'm driving or what have you, and I'm just talk to them and like a cardinal will fly past or their favorite song would turn on. And it's so real. And so important to just kind of give yourself that, because it can be overwhelming at times to just be like, okay, I don't know where they are. Like to even think about that was really tough for me in the beginning, to be like, where did they go? Like, you know, um, you have this kind of battle to understand it, because you can't really comprehend it as humans. You can believe things, but it's kind of just hard to open up in general. So once you can actually understand and sit there and be like, you know what, I'm ready to accept that they're, maybe not here in sight, but they'll always be here no matter what. They'll always live in like within you. So 100, they're in my dreams like all the time. And you can wake up and you can feel them. Like you can feel them like in your presence. And it's honestly, it sounds a bit scary sometimes, but it's the most comforting thing ever, because you know they're there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just a reminder like that love was so real, and it can just it lasts lifetimes. It's like how I like to think of it is that no matter what, like the grief is unexpressed love, but sometimes you can express it and just talk about it to them as if they're still here. And it just opens this whole other world of like, you know what, they are
Yeah.
and they can hear me. So yeah, 100%.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think that's really important. What you said was that you opened your heart, right? And I know a lot of time grief does, some people do the opposite, right? They close their heart off. They're so consumed with grief that they can't make that connection. So it's beautiful that you said that it doesn't take away the grief, or it doesn't, you're not getting rid of it or not dealing with it, but yet you can still open your heart to the love that existed there, and
Yeah.
that's where you can find them. I think that was beautiful on what you said, and also brave. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so easy to get lost in the overwhelming heaviness of grief, and to not close your heart off. I mean, and that's miraculous.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it definitely has taught me a lot to just kind of, when you feel emotions, to not hold on to them so tight. Because that's where a lot of, my really bad panic attacks were coming from, is like I would feel this thought and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I just tighten onto it instead of just letting it flow through you. Like you can be anxious, but don't hold it there. Like you can feel all these emotions, but don't, hold on to them. Even when it comes to joy and happiness and everything, it's like just feel them and don't get so worked up on being like, oh no, I'm feeling anxious. So that means I'm going to do this. And now you just freak yourself out. So instead, just be like, okay, I'm recognizing these emotions and just let them, flow through you. And I think that was one of the biggest things I learned with my own emotions, is like, even with stress, I'd like hold on to it all the time. It's like, okay, this feels productive if I hold on to this, but it's not healthy to, live that way. So I just think that's just a huge part of all of this, is just to all these intense emotions that come from grief, just let them flow through you and kind of be like the rock in the river, and just let it flow over you. So it's definitely it's just intense and it's complex, and I think it's just kind of the art of noticing and just listening to yourself and seeing how you react to things.
Beautiful. How are your siblings doing? I know your name is a combination of your family.
Yeah.
Aria.
Yeah. So my dad's name was Anthony. My mom's name was Rachel, and my sister's name is Isabella. My brother's name is Austin. So they took the first initial of all those names and then created Aria. So I definitely
Love it.
love my name for that, because like obviously I love my family, so it's very special to me. But yeah, my siblings are, you know how it is. Like it's just every day is a new day, but we just kind of all came together and really looked at this and just thought, yeah, we can do this. Like with the way we were raised. And there was times where like they would have to pick me up, I'd have to pick them up. And like, we were just supportive to each other. And I think that was such a huge thing, to just have each other through all of this,
Mhm.
because I couldn't imagine, life without them, or just doing this alone,
Mhm.
because that would be really hard. But we can all relate to each other because we went through the same thing. We had the same parents, and it's kind of just, we just get it. but we also are all grieving differently too. So it's definitely something that we're all working through and understanding each other's grief, which has been quite interesting because, I mean, you've gone through the same thing on paper, but you display it so differently. Like, especially like, men, I feel like bury their grief a lot more than women do sometimes, or yeah, so it's been quite interesting to communicate to each other, being like, well, you grieve in this way, or you kind of more so let it out here, or so yeah, that's definitely been a huge thing with the three of us, is to understand each other's grief.
Yeah, I think that was one of the lessons that I learned through my mother's passing was that, like you talked about, there's the 5 steps or the 5 levels of grieving, which could be true for everybody, but everybody experiences differently. I learned afterwards that grieving is a very personal thing, right? It's about your loss. It's about, it really is about you, and you go through it differently based off of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's so individual. So I think when people think of it, I mean, I'm guilty of this too. Before I lost my parents, they were the first experience I had with grief. So I'm like, when I saw someone lose their parents, I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine. Because you put it in your shoes. Like you're like, I couldn't imagine losing my mum. But it's not like that. Like maybe it's not like that for them with how you want to react to it. And I think after going through it, now I kind of like, my friend lost her dad at a young age. So we kind of have that in common, but it's so different. And I think I had to kind of realize, like, let me understand her grief instead of being like, no, I get it. Like, I mean, you can relate. We both lost our dad and this won't and but no, it's not like that. It's 100% so individual. And I look at her and I think, how is she coping with this? Not, well, I've been through it, so I get it. So it's definitely something people, I mean, with no ill intent, I don't think, but people are guilty of that all the time. It's just like, well, I put myself in your shoes, so I get it. I understand it. But sometimes, most of the time, you don't. Even if you've been through it, you just have to kind of understand it on their level. Um, yeah.
Which makes sense that you just show up for them, right? Like you were saying, you don't have to, try to explain away their grief. It's just that you're there for them and they're experiencing it and they appreciate your presence. You are so wise, Aria. I'm just so amazed at your wisdom and your integrity. It's a
Oh, thank
beautiful thing. Yeah.
you. Thank you so
Looks like
much.
I'm sure you're going to help many, many people. How did you get your book published? That's what I was going to ask you too.
Yeah, so my dad published 2 books on business, and then his publisher reached out to me, and we published a book together.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so
That's good.
yeah, it was awesome. I would have never thought, but she reached out, and I was like, oh my gosh, good idea. But I'm definitely going to write another one, and I want to write an act like not a poetry book, like about my story and kind of things I've learned in hopes it can help other people cope.
Mhm. Wonderful. You're a good writer.
Thank you.
So, do you still work with animals in any way, or are you solely concentrating on your books at this point?
Yeah, so we don't really have anything to do with the company anymore. So no, I don't really work with animals. We do have a few of our own, but not directly. I definitely want to volunteer at the local shelter though, more just because I love doing it. But I have been focusing on my writing and on that as well more often. And just trying to figure out where I'm going to go with this. I think it's just such a decision we all have. Is like, what do I do in life? What's my passion? But it's definitely talking about grief, I think, and definitely helping others. So wherever I go with it, that's my goal and that's my passion. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure you already have helped so many, and you will continue to help. I mean, it just amazing, um, and I think so needed in the world. So we thank you.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's definitely been tricky to write and publish a book and hear everyone like read your words, because it's very vulnerable sometimes to just release something that's so personal to you. But it's been I was so nervous publishing it because I'm like, oh, what if people don't like it and this and that? I'm like, it's not about if people like it or not. If it's about if people can relate to the words. And then I started to hear from people that, I didn't even know. They'd like DM me on Instagram. They're like, oh, my friend gave me this book. And like, I just wanted to say how much it helped. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my goal with this. So there was honestly that whole like, I guess insecurities you have kind of went away. And I'm like, I don't need to be insecure about sharing my words because I know it helped one person. So yeah, it's been a learning. I never thought I'd publish a book, so it's definitely been a learning curve to just put it out there. And I've been reading some of my poetry on like my social medias as well, which is like kind of out of my comfort zone, but it's been I know it's something that is going to be good if other people can relate to it. So it's all that matters.
Absolutely. I mean, even just with the one poem that I first heard with the mass, I mean, it wasn't even about grief for me, but it gave me a whole new perspective to look at and changed my, my energy, my whole thought. And I really was like, wow, that was beautiful. That was a gift I never looked at before. So it touched me, even though it wasn't about grief. So I think you're, like I said before, you're touching so many people on different levels.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, no, definitely. In my next book, my next poetry book, I'm gonna have a lot longer poems as well that kind of explain things more in depth because this is like grief and just my life in general, but I think my next book is going to be a lot more grief focused, but also however you want to interpret it, because poetry is such an art. So, um, but yeah, it's just so therapeutic to write and just go into, and it teaches me so much more about myself. I think any sort of writing does.
Yeah.
It's important to journal and, write down what you're thinking, for you to reflect on that and just understand your thought processes a little better.
Absolutely. Aria, did you do the artwork in the book too? There's some sketches in the book. Did you do
Yeah,
those?
my friend Molly McGreevy did.
Oh,
I designed the front page, like the idea, but she's like the artist, so she was able
oh,
to do it. But the rest of the illustrations in the book are all from Molly. Yeah,
very
I just
nice.
got the poem and kind of did it. So, but yeah, I actually in high school in my art class, I designed this face on like I was in a pottery class and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I like the look of this face. And then they're like, name your piece. And I was like, oh, the tears that water my growth. And because it just made sense to me. And then later on, I'm like, oh, that should be the name of my book. And it just clicked, because it's so true. Um, but yeah, no, she was able to make it look good, but that was just the idea I had. But yeah, no, I never thought in that moment that it would become a book, but here we are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation or any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just be patient with your grief is like my only overall advice is just sit there and, don't judge it. Don't say, oh, I'm doing this wrong. I didn't get out of bed today. Like I should, don't judge it. Just sit there and understand it and take it as it comes. There's no permanence with it. So definitely just
Mhm.
be patient with yourself.
That's
And where
great.
can people find your book? I mean, are you on Amazon or
Yeah, I'm on Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. Yeah.
Fantastic Lies? So just everybody go out and get it. And we look very forward to your next book. Thank you
Yes.
so much for being a guest on our show. We commend you for all your wonderful work. And until next time, how is your intuition leading you to the next perfect step?